Hey Eric, this is going to be a demo for you for your Obi-Wan Kenobi hilt that you sent me. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth than I normally do on my demo videos just because of the history. I'm not going to name the company that installed this, but I will say that putting this video up on YouTube, you're free to use the link however you want. Um, and we'll just leave it at that, but I won't be naming them in the video. So when this hilt came to me, I had to gut everything from the inside, and we'll go over that now, and then we'll go over how your hilt works and what it does currently. This was the chassis that came in the hilt, which I like where it was going. I mean, it's a nice chassis. It does use a keystone for the battery, which is just a personal preference whether you use it or not. I personally don't like to use the keystone. I put my own battery terminals in here, and I model my chassis to accept the battery terminals. But you know, this one had a keystone, which is fine. You do see where it's glued in here. Where they put the speaker is a good orientation for your hilt because you don't have sound venting on your pommel. You actually have it in these two holes. That's where your sound is at. So when the chassis lines up, you know, the speaker is right where it needs to be so that you can have sound venting through here. So I kept that as well. One thing I didn't care for was the amount of hot glue that was used here. That's a lot. I actually took a lot of that off so I could get the board off, and the board was kind of covered in it too. I do have the board here, we'll talk about that in a second. But you can see the glue there. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but the inside of the hilt was so dirty with different, it's metal dust is what it is, because it migrated towards the speaker and it hooked to the magnet. So I mean, that all that right there, that's metal dust that collected onto the magnet. That's very bad for the board as well. So if that was inside of your hilt that traveled, it's got to be some on your board, and probably was part of the reason, you know, or at least could contribute to any defects on this. As you told me, this hilt didn't even work upon arrival, and after digging into it I could see why. But that's just of note right there. That was kind of disturbing, all those metal flakes. And then you can see on the underside of the battery or the speaker the amount of super glue that was used to hold that speaker in. So what happened here is the top side of the chassis wasn't modeled appropriately to accept that speaker. So they slapped the speaker on top and compensated by hot gluing the shit out of it on the bottom, and the wires as well. I just want to give you a chance to see what's going on there. Then we'll move on to the board. This is what I took off the chassis. Now granted, you know, I'm trying to think of the word for it. They took some liberties thinking that the board would never be seen, and it was like super glued in here like this, just like that, and all that was crammed. This was crammed into the area of your hilt right here where the grenade section is. So I ripped a bunch of super glue off the sides and off the bottom. This is a Profi version 1.5, so it was a good board, but the SD card wouldn't even click in here. The spring mechanism was busted in this SD card assembly, so it was just floating. Also, this is the wrong type of wire. You know, some of it's the right gauge. I mean, you got a lot of 22 gauge wire, which should only be used for power. You got 24 gauge wire. Speaker wire is too big. Don't necessarily need this connector, you know, not when everything else isn't connected. I'm guessing that this is some kind of resistor or something, but if you could see that in the camera, if it will focus, whatever that was, it burnt right through the shrink tube and exposed. So that could have been touching metal. It looks burnt. It smells nasty. This is a hot mess. It's a hot mess. Then we get into your PCB section, which is right here for your NeoPixels. You can see what I did in there for you. So we've got some short pin NeoPixels in there. I don't use the ones from TCSS. I get mine from a different source because I buy them in bulk. They're very good pixel PCBs, very good connectors. I get my actual pogo pins from Amazon, and the PCBs from Osh Park actually is where I get them. So this is the PCB connector that came in your hilt. It's the wiring is okay. It's fine. There's nothing, you know, not necessarily wrong with anything with the wiring down here, but until you get up top. I'm trying to focus the camera. I don't know if my phone's gonna do it. Maybe not. I will send you some clearer pictures that you can use along with the video if you like. But what I noticed right away when I was looking at this is that 3 of the pogo pins are broken. So the top piece of the pin that actually connects to your blade, they're broken off. What struck me the most though was one of these pins right here about where my finger's at is actually soldered in upside down. So that's wild. I mean, that should have been orientated the opposite way and coming in through the back and soldered on the back, and they just soldered it in. You can almost see it right there. If I get an Allen key, I'll tell you it's that one right there they're sitting on. It's soldered in upside down. So these all, with 3 broken pins and one that's soldered upside down, right there, that's why your blade didn't work. There's some things that were wrong with your blade too, but we'll get into that in a second as well. So that kind of details what I mean, everything that I took out of the hilt. You won't be able to see all of my chassis because of just the way that your hilt's set up. You're actually going to unscrew this part right here to get to the chassis. So from this silver clamp piece up, you'll never see it. So what I've done is I've pulled it up on my computer and shown you the model that I did and what I printed and used. So this is the chassis that I made. Very similar. Just right here, I didn't go with the key style. If you can see my cursor. And in this area for the battery, I did not go with a key style. It is meant to accept the battery terminals. In this area right here for the speaker, I apologize, I'm trying to point my camera at the screen without actually seeing what's on my phone. But this part right here for the speaker, I made it the correct diameter to accept a 28mm bass speaker. So when I put my bass speaker in here, it was a press fit. There's no glue and nothing holding that in. It's just an extremely tight press fit. This is the bottom, by the way, and then this is the wire path right here for the wires coming from your battery terminal and going towards your board. Another thing I did over in this section is that I actually made this shelf long enough so the entire board could fit on it. So between this area and this area right here is about 2/3 of the board, and that's where the board is a tight press fit into the chassis. So no glue, no adhesive of any kind. A tight press fit into this area right here is what holds your board in. And then I shamelessly brand all my chassis, so sorry about that, but that's what I brand them. So that is what's inside of your hilt that you can't see. Let me get rid of my computer. I didn't know if you knew this or not, so I just wanted to cover it real quick. The hilt itself, it's a beautiful hilt. It's actually made by 89 Sabers. It's an 89 Sabers Obi-Wan Kenobi. Reason I know that, there's 2 reasons why. One is because I do this all the time, and 2 is I actually bought one and had one come in a day before I got yours. So this is the box that mine came in, and then I haven't even had a chance to mess with mine yet. But that's my hilt, same thing. So you've got it, just for your own knowledge, you've got an 89 Sabers Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's a beautiful hilt. This is for my personal collection. I don't have too many for my personal collection, but that one's staying with me. So let's open this up, or let's talk about the buttons first. It is a 2-button setup. You know, purposely they have the 2 buttons, they have different profiles than each other. One is larger than the other. So I chose to make the larger button your activation, which is going to be up towards the emitter, right? And then back here, when you're wielding it around, this is your auxiliary. So you don't need to open up this clamp to unscrew this back part. We'll just unscrew it now. So, like I said, removable battery. I'm using a new set of battery terminals than the last hilt that you got from me. I switched to these terminals from now on to help people with battery orientation. So, you know, like in everything that's ever taken a battery, the spring side is the negative, and then to stay consistent with everything that I install, the positive end goes towards the back. It actually doesn't go towards the speaker this time because the speaker is in the middle, but the battery positive end always towards the back. So you'll notice that on this hilt there's a little bit of circular damage from screwing in the back of the pommel all the way. I actually got that a little bit on mine as well. You can see it right here. There you go. So what that came from, if I can find it, is this screw right here was originally holding in your end cap. Right there, right in the middle of that cross. So, and it was protruding from that metal X bracket right there. So what I did was I took this out. I did use some E6000 and I epoxied your end cap on. Once it cures, it will stay on there. It's good to go. If ever you wanted to pop it off, you could stick like a pencil or something in there. If you gave it enough force, E6000 comes loose. That's why I chose to use E6000 instead of a glue. But that little bit of profile space that I saved on that screw solved the issue of that circular scratching that you see on the chassis. It doesn't affect the chassis any. It was just like the first couple times I was putting it on and off and testing the functionality, I noticed that, so I saw a way that I could fix that. So that's what we did here. So I've got a battery right here. I'll be sending you this battery. Positive side goes in pretty easy. This chassis is held in with 2 set screws. So one set screw is right here, and then another 180 degrees right here where you can't see it. Your speaker orientation is lined up with the battery, so right underneath these 3 holes, or these 2 holes in this one slot, is your 28mm bass speaker. It sits right in here, and then your board is right here. Okay, so if you ever needed to access your board, you could unscrew these 2 battery assemblies, flip open this clamp, slide this middle section off. You'll notice in there where you can immediately see your speaker, and then right up towards the back, if you use a pair of tweezers, you can get to your board if you need to. I made sure that it was accessible, but on this particular hilt, that's what it is. So let's throw a battery in here.
What brings you out this far?
And we'll take your pommel and we'll screw it back on. Doesn't have to be tight. When you feel it tighten up, you can just stop. I do have a blade plug, your blade plug. We'll talk about that before we fire this thing up, and then we can test it with the blade plug first, and then your 2 blades. So this blade plug, I cut 2/3 of the material off because when I had it in the emitter, I mean, it was sticking out to here. That looks a little ridiculous for a blade plug. Really, what you'd want to see for a blade plug is the top of this plug even with the top of your emitter. I couldn't get it down that far because this little greebly that screws in actually goes, it has a housing that it screws into, and it comes down to about that far in the tube. So I didn't have any more room to cut it, but I cut it down as far as I could. So we'll put that in. I actually rewired this as well. I went to see what was going on here. You said, because you mentioned it wasn't working, the data cable just fell right off the LEDs when I opened it up, so it wasn't soldered well at all. And then you had your customary glue in there. So you do have a blade retention screw right here. Activation. Let me turn the light off.
End here, like this.
Activation. Smooth swing. So you can see
I am lost.
your blade plug now works. I'm going to take this out real quick. Now we have two blades. One is from me that had a slight dead spot in the middle because the LEDs, when they were soldered in from the factory, I did not unsolder them and bring them closer together. So that's my fault. Sorry about that. I fixed that. I don't have a hilt that takes a 7/8 inch blade right now. So what I did is I just 3D printed a quick adapter that makes this 7/8 inch blade fit into a 1 inch hilt, so that I could fire this up for you real quick and you could see everything works. I'm not going to screw in the blade retention. I'm just going to pop this in the hilt, hit the activation button so that you can see that it works. Let me back up a little bit. I'm going to come closer for you and go all the way down the length of the blade so that you can see everything's nice and even.
One doesn't survive as long as I have done.
You might notice that slow scroll you're asking me about too. All your fonts have them. I didn't forget. So there's your 7/8 inch blade. I'm going to keep the adapter. I just printed it for the purposes of showing you in this hilt that it works without damaging it. You don't ever want to use a 7/8 inch blade in a 1 inch hilt. It'll move around and it'll short the pins, and that's no bueno. Let's talk about the blade that came with your hilt that you bought from the company that has no name. So again, when I took this apart, firstly, I didn't have to take it apart really. The PCB connector for the hilt side just fell out of the hilt. So I unwired it, tried to rewire it to a nice TCSS PCB holder, but then so again the data line just fell off your LEDs. So I like what they were doing here with the LEDs. I've never used these. It seems like a good concept. It's a double-sided LED strip. It seems to be all one piece. It would have been pretty sweet if it had worked, but it didn't. And then when I rewired it, I resoldered these wires and wired them to a PCB, and it still didn't light up. So I'm not sure what's going on here. I don't have much experience with these. It's not typically what I use. So I had to put in 2 brand new strips in for you. And just to give you an idea, these are the strips that I use. They're really good LED strips. I took side-by-side comparison photos that I'll send those to you, but it looks really good. And those are the same strips that are in the 7/8 inch blade as well. So I'm going to send this strip back to you. I'm going to send all the parts back to you that I took out of your hilt so that you can have them, throw them away, whatever you want to do, but they're yours, so you get them back. So I had to gut this thing, take the strips out, put brand new strips in. I see that you probably can't see it too well in the video, but you know it because you've had this in your hand. But this, from about right here to the end of the blade, has been knurled a little bit. Not really necessary for the hilt that you've got. It would be cool in other sabers like 89 Sabers Graflex, the blades have to be sanded a lot. So to have that knurling on the blade would be awesome. But in this case, it's just going to show when you put it in your hilt. I couldn't fix that, so we left that alone. I did use their PCB holder, but what they did is they had it threaded so it screwed in, but I had to cut off a piece of your blade about that long, and then so it didn't have the threads in it anymore. So what I did is I took this and I filed down all of the threads. I did glue it in. This is one of the few pieces that I will use glue, but from the PCB to the holder, I didn't use glue. What I normally do is I will pop those in there. It's a nice press fit. I will use hot glue in there, or in this case I used E6000. I don't have any hot glue sticks at the moment, but I do like E6000 because once it cures, it's a solid hold, but it does come apart if you need it to. So that is a complete rebuild on, I was able to use the holder and the tube and the foam, but the PCB and the two strips are mine that I put in there. So we're going to throw this in there, and then we're going to go through the different, I'm going to step on back, and we're going to go through the different functionalities. It's a little bit looser of a fit than I would have liked to have seen. Usually I like to see them fit in there pretty snug, but it's because of that knurling that they did on the tip of the blade. If I had cut that off, your blade would look weird though. So I'm going to turn this light off. I'm going to step back and we're going to go through some things. Firstly, we're going to go through, notice the slow scroll. And then tap for blaster deflex. Hold your auxiliary button down for blade lockup. To change color just like your other one, hold your auxiliary button and twist your wrist like this. Now you can actually twist the wrist just like before and cycle through different colors. And then when you get to one that you like, just tap the button. Either button will do. We'll turn it back on to go through blade effects. Let's do that on the camera real quick. So I want you to make sure to see this slow scroll. There you go. Now hold your auxiliary button down and twist your wrist, but keep the aux button held down. Hold it down. Blade profiles. This one has 31 different profiles on it. We're going to go through some of them. Just going to sit here and slowly cycle through them. When you find one that you like, I'm just going to go to the rainbow blade, if I can find it again. Tap the button. Rainbow blade. But there's 31 different ones on there to choose from. So I'm going to turn this off. I can tell you right now that I do not like the way that they knurled this hilt or this blade to fit in the emitter. It's loose. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to just send you this blade adapter with the 7/8 inch blade in case you want to use it. All it does is it slides on and off just like this. So I just slide it on, make it even with the PCB. You can put it in your hilt just like this. Tighten your set screw and good to go. I mean, this is a better fit than the actual hilt, the blade that came with your hilt. So you'll have the option if you want. I'll just leave it on there. No biggie. So I think that's everything. I'm gonna upload this video, send you the video. We'll go through. Let me just tell you one last thing on how to take the battery out. Just so you can see me do it one time. I'll just put it like this. I have these tweezers that have a hard rubber coating on them. You don't want to stick anything metal on there. You don't want to touch the positive contact. But I usually just put it on the side of the battery, and it pops right out. With the spring-mounted system, it's a lot easier than the other one that you have. I do like the other one. It's a nice, secure fit for the battery, but this one lends itself to, you know, a little bit of ease of taking things in and out. So that's what you got. If you got any questions, let me know. Happy to answer them for you. If not, looking to get this out in the mail possibly today, but the latest Tuesday, since Monday is a holiday. All right, thank you.